All right, Zoe is coming on next.
Yeah. So talking about someone who you're probably going to know after this design summit, Zoe Middleton is joining us again.
Oh! You can't get rid of me so fast.
Let me just say, guys, when I've known Zoe for years, and I'm thinking this woman's got energy. We need to bring her up on camera just so that we can have a little taste of Zoe. It's like this amped up, this energy. Just keep us going.
Yes. No, like I said, Zoe, earlier, like just a shot of adrenaline. I love it. Every time you come on camera. So yeah,
all the time too.
So good. So yeah, Zoe's going to be the next moderator for the next panel. Angela, do you want to introduce her since I had the pleasure of introducing her last time?
To introduce Zoe.
Yeah.
You know, I have to say yes. I mean, like, how do we introduce Zoe? Just the energy, just the vibe, the person who can do 50,000 things at once. Zoe. With style, with personality, right? I love that you are going to be able to lead us through to this next piece of the conversation, because I think we all want to know what's happening next in this world, right? In the when it comes to the future of fashion. I mean, look, am I only just, you know, I did dress beyond this one box, you know, and how is this world going to change? I love that, you know, Zoe, you've been in product development, you've been in the world of fashion, hard goods, soft goods. You know, you understand the business perspective. So it'll be interesting to hear the feedback that we get from all of these guys. From Tara, you know, interested to hear what Tara has to say about.
Seriously, yeah, no, resource library, very interesting.
Yes.
And even Emily Smith from Lafayette 148.
Right?
I mean, love a woman-owned business and what they're putting out there in product. It's going to be very interesting to see where the future of fashion is going. Is there technology? How is COVID affecting us all? Is retail dead? I mean, so many stores closing. Sustainability is really important. And I just am very much looking forward to getting Rob's perspective on men's accessories and just fashion in general in terms of the accessories category. So yeah, no, I'm excited to, you know, pick their brain and see what they have to say.
I love it. I'm excited. Let's find out. Let's have them show us where that future will be, right? What are we going to help design for the world?
There's Rob. Hi, Rob.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, super excited to be here.
Well, I know we are excited to have you with us today. Hi, Tara. How are you?
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Good, great to see you.
And
hey, Tara.
I don't see Emily. Okay, well, I'm going to introduce the panel that we have so far. Rob Price, Senior Director of Men's Accessories from Michael Kors. Tara St. James, founder of Resource Library. Very excited to have a couple of questions for you, Tara. I'm very excited that you're here. And Emily is joining us as well, so this is very exciting. Emily Smith is from Lafayette 148, and she's the creative director. So hello. Oh.
I'm here. Can you see? Can you see? Can you hear me?
We can see you. We can hear you.
Yes. You guys.
So let's just kick off by I've already mentioned you guys' names, but would you mind just going into a little bit of your background and like what inspires you and kind of how you got to where you are today? And then I have a couple of other questions lined up. So Tara, would you like to start?
So my background, very quickly, I studied fashion design, so I'm formally trained as a men's tailor designer. And the first 10 years of my career was in the denim industry. I'm also Canadian, so I'm born and raised in Montreal and moved to New York 15 years ago, which was approximately the same time when I started my research and development in the sustainability sector of the fashion world when I started a brand previous to my current brand, which was called Study New York. And Study was really created in an effort to counter all of the negative aspects of the fashion industry. So I wanted to bring the manufacturing back here to New York City, which wasn't really being done very much at the time. I was using environmentally friendly materials, again, very limited at that time, and trying to implement zero waste strategies in the collection, all of which was very early stage for the industry, but other people had started doing this, and I really wanted to implement those strategies. Fast forward a little bit to the future, I started teaching a class on sustainable textiles at FIT in the Sustainability Certificate Program, which I still teach. And I worked as a mentor and production coordinator at the Brooklyn Fashion and Design Accelerator, which was an initiative of Pratt Institute for 5 years until we sadly closed the doors last summer, which then evolved to Resource Library. So all the mentorship work and the material library that I had started at the BFDA, then I didn't really want it to disappear. So I started my own consultancy called Resource Library, which is an extension of the material library. And so there I work with independent designers as well as some bigger brands to help them understand their sustainability strategies and also find more responsible materials.
Wonderful. Rob Price?
Yeah, so I actually am an industrial designer by schooling. I went to school with Zoe at Pratt Institute. So it's a Pratt linkage here. And then ended up in the fashion industry, building and designing global brands and leading creative teams to create innovative products. As Zoe said, at Michael Kors, and known for my work at Coach as well. So that's how I ended up in this place, and ended up working with Tara about a year ago. We were talking to her about some sustainability opportunities for Michael Kors. So it's the links, the networks all come together.
Fabulous. Emily?
Hi, everybody. I'm the creative director for Lafayette 148. I've actually worked for this company for, I think it's like 18 years, which is like an anomaly in this industry. You know, what you had said before, it's a woman-run business. So there's, you know, it's just been such a family partnership to be a part of. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I always wanted to be a fashion designer. So I feel like I'm one of the few people who actually knows what I wanted to do and kind of like followed that passion throughout the process. I mean, and it sounds just so shallow, but honestly, I just love clothes. And that's like the reason why I love to be a part of this whole process, because it's fun, the way clothes make you feel, the way they bring out your personality, the way they give you confidence, you know, the touch, the hand, all those tactile, great sensations. I don't know. I feel like all designers should be just so grateful and thankful that we can do beautiful things. That's the point of what we do, and the innovation behind it. And I don't know, I feel really lucky to be able to do what I love every day.
Wonderful. So let's jump right into this.
Okay.
What's happening with retail? How are you surviving through this crazy time of retail? So many retail stores are closing, filing for bankruptcy. What are you guys doing, and how do you foresee, you know, surviving through this interesting period in our time right now? Who would like to go first, Rob?
Yeah, it's insane. Like, you just open the newspaper and you're like, oh wow, okay, bye J. Crew. And yeah, I think it's gonna just the whole thing right now with the pandemic and everything that's going on is just hitting the big reset button on what's happening for fashion. And retail has been changing towards a digital format and evolving, but it's going to continue to propel it in a much bigger way. I heard a thing from Mickey Drexler the other day about, do we even need department stores anymore? And I think that question is just a really interesting thing. Like, what does the future look like? How do we come out of this pandemic, and how are we going to shop? So I think retail is such an interesting conversation.
Tara?
Yeah, so I hate to admit this, but from my brand's perspective, I evolved to direct-to-consumer model about a year and a half ago. not because I didn't want to work with retail, but just because as an independent brand owner, I found it too difficult to deal with the margins of the wholesale markup. It was just too challenging for me. Even though I loved all of the small boutique owners that I worked with, and they were really ambassadors for the brand and able to tell the story. And I hope to be able to go back to that. But I think it's really hard, especially in New York City, to have a retail location with the cost of rent and overhead, and now with this pandemic, what that's going to look like. And I think some of the retailers are being very creative about their solutions, opening up coffee shops in the front of their stores and things like that. But others are struggling to find a way to survive through this. And I think it's going to be really challenging. I'm curious to see how it evolves digitally, but it's really not my preference. I don't love living a life online. And so I hope that's not the future. But I think there are some countries that are doing things interestingly too. So Rob mentioned the request or the need for department stores. And I know in Sweden, at least one department store was converted to a resale department store. So they were selling secondhand goods and swapping. So still utilizing that space and that connection between people, but not filling it with new products. So I think that's really, really interesting. But I think it's only certain communities that can really tackle that well.
Mm-hmm. Emily?
I mean, I agree with what Tara was just saying there before too. It's like, the question mark of department stores and their need, but I think also there will always be that sense of people wanting to go to stores and touch and feel, especially like luxury goods. How do you show that online? It's very difficult. Right. And of course, that's something that we're working towards too, just now to rethink how our online presence can be a little bit more tactile, to really show all those details and explain it, because, I'm definitely old school. I definitely prefer to be in the stores and feel and touch things. I mean, that's sort of an amazing experience. And I really hope that never goes away. I read somewhere today, it was like safety is the new luxury. And it's true. It's like we're talking about reopening our stores and how we want to do that, either through, one-on-one appointments, or, like having only one customer in the store at a time, or we're even investing in having our own stylist creating this new segment of our business called Atelier Direct, where we're actually going directly to our customers and selling in a different way. So I just think it's creating an opportunity for all of us to think outside the box and approach it differently. But retail stores are a form of branding for brands too. I mean, it's your one great place to, have all those five senses come to life within this virtual space, that you can do part of that online, but you can never not do that with, out having like a store to show it. So, I think we'll get through this. I think there'll be a lot less, but we'll see where we go.
So to the point of a lot of these retail department stores, I'm not a big shopper, but I do, I'm the type of shopper who likes to touch and feel. But I do see a push on the technology side with trying to get holograms and, oh, look, it's 3D. Isn't that cool? I think it's cool. But at the same time, I still want to touch it, right? Because I want to feel the quality of the material. I might want to try it on, and you can't really do that with a hologram. So it'd be really kind of see how.
Yes.
Try, because I think it was like I was reading this article. It was like Louis Vuitton, or one of these main mass luxury brands, were starting to do these holograms so that shoppers can look it on their phone. Oh, great! This is how I look in this dress. Put my foot up, here's my new shoe, it's like, is it really the same?
Kind of interesting though. Wow.
Can I touch on that though for a second? Because I totally agree with you. I think that I'm a textile person, so the first thing that I do when I shop is touch the material to see how it feels and how it drapes. And I think technology has sort of failed us in two ways with this regard. Is one, even though it's tried to show the drape of a fabric in high-res photos, hasn't really quite gotten there yet. And then the other thing is fit. Like no matter how much 3D body scanning we're doing, we're still not there in a way that we can show a customer what something is going to fit like on them and how it's going to make them feel. And I don't know if we're ever going to get past that, but to touch on that 3D digital imaging, I think that's kind of the future of really high fashion design. with regards to influencers and social media who are currently just buying really cheap products, wearing it once and then discarding it because they already wore it. And so the alternative to that from a sustainability standpoint is getting just a digital garment that you don't even have to buy and doesn't go through the supply chain.
Right.
And then another little fun fact that I heard recently is one of the biggest new employers of fashion designers lately has been video gamers to design clothing for the avatars.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me.
I think that's
not what I would want to do with my skills, but I could see how that would be really appealing, and it's not creating new products. So I kind of like that side of it. So you can still produce all of these new fashion designers, but they're creating a digital footprint, of course, but it's not going through the whole supply chain and natural resources and human labor to just create something that's going to go to landfill. So I kind of really love the idea of that for future fashion design.
I think that's such a great point. And sorry to jump in and build off of that, but I think the technology in the retail is kind of the last stage. I think it's going to actually be more dominant throughout the process in terms of how things are constructed, new innovative ways in terms of making smaller runs of products, or just in terms of less waste. So I think the more technology could kind of insert itself along that supply chain is going to enhance it, not just at the end. And I love that idea of the 3D augmented reality, really kind of creating that step of like, oh, should we even make this? And I think a lot of times you go through this process with, at least in my world with fashion accessories, you can't get the drapes in 3D like modeling. So you have to actually make the prototype and try it out and see and get into it. And does it work? Does it function? Does it fit you right? And yeah, how do we start to reinvent that development and design process?
So this question is for all the panelists, and sticking with technology. Rob, specifically for you in terms of accessories, how do you see accessories going forward in the future in terms of 10 years, 20 years? Are we adding more technology that my dress is going to tell me your blood sugar level is too high, or what?
You know, I think there's definitely some of that, like 5-10 years out. I think there's going to be so much more connectivity in terms of it linking to our phones or iPads or whatever the new version of that is. But I think immediately people are going to start using at least accessories. Like, where do they put their hand sanitizer? Is it you know, antimicrobial? Can you put your face mask in a place where it's not with your keys or your change? And are you going to be using money anymore after this? Like, do we want to touch this dirty piece of paper or metal that you know, might contain viruses on it? I think it's some of those products we interact with on a daily basis that improve our lives. We're going to want to have those be a little bit more relevant towards the habits we formed in quarantine.
Sure. Tara?
Very thoughtful.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think it's going that way. I'm not really a huge wearable tech person. I think a lot of it has to do with privacy issues that terrify me. But I do see a lot of connectivity. I also see great functionality of technology for end of life. So understanding not only where the garment came from and how it was made, but also how to recycle it. And right now that's just so obscure and impossible to track. And there are companies like Circular ID from Eon that are working on this kind of thing. So it can communicate not only where the product came from, but what can be done with it when the customer no longer wants to wear it. And I think that's going to be really important for the future of the supply chain and sustainability. We're not there yet, but getting there.
Emily.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, it's not so much about technology. I mean, with fabrications, there's so much development as far as materials is mostly to deal with sustainability kind of purposes, you know, recycling different things to create different, you know, fibers. And, you know, we just did a whole experiment where there's this one sort of down jacket that we've been running for years. And Katrin, who is somebody who knows Tara very well, actually worked with the suppliers to resource something using recycled polyester that we could use the exact same quality but recreate it. So, I mean, I think there's so many great opportunities with how we can, and it's more from, again, a sustainable standpoint of using technology to improve the qualities that we're using so that they are more traceable. They are, you know, to your point, what we can do with them afterwards, how we can not just throw them in a landfill, but repurpose them in some sort of way.
Sticking to the point, Emily, about repurposing, I have to say, hats off to Jane Fonda, okay? She's like, I'm not buying any more clothes, okay? I'm just going to recycle through my closet for any of these major gallery, you know, when she has to walk the red carpet. And I think that's a valid point, right? Like, do I need 28 pairs of jeans in my closet when I only have 2 legs?
Right.
And there's only 7 days out of the week.
Right.
Like, let's think about the environment a little bit. Do I really need it or not? Fascinating. Oh, I'm so enjoying this conversation. So, sticking with clearly fashion and future, trends. You know, I used to be in the fashion world, and Rob and I talked about this a little bit in terms of how are trends happening and developing. We travel to see the trends all over the world, and we come back and put together our stories, right? We're not traveling right now. Not too much is happening. So how does this affect us going forward in terms of trend development, forecasting, and coming up with still on-trend markets based off of where we are today?
Can I start?
Yes, of course.
I mean, hopefully what this will do is create actual originality, you know, because I think, you know, even with the idea of, I've been reading that they might even be doing buy now, wear now closer to the season, sort of runway shows and things like that too, because, you know, it's such a vicious cycle of people put what they're doing out there and then Zara or somebody comes in and copies it right away. And
yes,
it's just, you know, this idea of fast fashion and the, you know, copying of something, like hopefully it sort of just reduces a lot of that and people actually have to come up with a good idea, you know, and think about it and be true to who their brand is and who their customer is. I think the most important thing is you've got to know your own customer and what are her needs and feed off of what's going on in the world. So hopefully, I don't know, I miss traveling, you know, but obviously that's, you know, that's one carbon footprint that's not a good thing that we're all doing in the world too much. But I think it's also like, use your imagination a little more. It's not a bad thing.
We were born with brains.
Yes, we used it a lot when we were kids. Somehow we forgot when we got older.
And I don't even think travel has been that relevant anymore. When I started designing like 20 years ago, we would do quarterly trips to Europe to see what the big new trend was, because Europe was 2 years ahead of North America. And that timing, I think I saw get shorter and shorter and shorter until it disappeared. And now I think everything is online so quickly that you're not even really seeing anything that different unless you're going somewhere super obscure. But how many brands actually do that anymore? Very few. So I love what Emily's saying. Yeah, it's going to create some originality and hopefully be introspective into what the brand's identity really is. And that's what's happening right now. Brands are really having to look inside themselves and say, what do we stand for? What's our strategy? And who are we really? Because I think that's what consumers are asking for. They really want to identify with these brands now and respect them through their purchasing power.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, and to kind of build on that, I totally agree with Emily and Tara. The originality, you know, it feels like it got to a point where there wasn't a lot of originality. And what's happening right now is everyone is in lockdown. A lot of people are just learning and like pushing and doing really creative things. And I've been working with some of these New York City design schools and some of these kids, and they just have this tremendous amount of talent and they are just coming up with incredible things right now. And there's so much, this design renaissance is going to come out of this COVID. And I'm so excited to see this burst of creativity and this enthusiasm around new ideas that not just reinvent the products, but the whole ecosystem and the process of how it's made. So you're seeing it happen. And just after things open up, it's just going to be this like explosion of new ideas.
Robbie touched on something that I want to build on a little bit more, and that's manufacturing. So Emily, I noticed that Lafayette 146, of course, was in Wooster Street. and Lafayette, and then you guys relocated to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and you're doing manufacturing out of there as well. I'd be curious to know a little bit more based off of what's happening right now with, I mean, of course, COVID, right? And then we have these ridiculous tariffs for working overseas that we keep getting hit on. Do you see manufacturing kind of blowing back up a little bit more here in the US? How do you kind of maneuver going forward with these additional tariffs to make sure that you can still offer great pricing to your customers without taking on these unnecessary costs?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the hard part with doing it in the US is just literally finding the talent and labor who wants to do it. You know, it's unfortunately something that's not really praised or brought up as, you know, like in Europe, it's still something that's looked at as like a craft and something that's beautiful. And in America, it feels like everybody just wants to be like a celebrity, you know, whatever, not, you know, like not actually make something and be proud of it. So I think that's going to be a hard battle that, you know, maybe the school system needs to promote in a different way. And there's something that we can do that we can bring this up as sort of a respectable kind of really unique craft job that happens. You know, our business model obviously is based on the fact that we own our own factory in China. Our original factory was in New York and we had to move it overseas because the labor costs got too high in America. And now we're being hit by the tariffs. So it's like the other pendulum, you know, so it is a funky balance, you know, and if we wanted to move it even to Europe, it's still another expense and tariffs are coming from there. So, you know, you're always trying to chase it a little bit, but, you know, the one thing you never want to sacrifice is the quality. So, right. You know, I mean, of course we would love to be able to do more here, but it's not so easy.
True. Tara?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I studied design in school, it was a very technically driven school. So we learned pattern making. I mean, I said I had a background in tailoring. So the design was actually less of a focus than the construction, pattern making, sewing. Most of my classes were understanding textiles. And I'm so grateful for that now looking back on my career. And I think a lot of the design schools just really don't focus on the skills needed to make a garment. It's more about being a designer, and yet there aren't enough design jobs out there to accommodate all these students, and they don't necessarily want to go into the design world. They might want to be part of the creative team that's making the garment, constructing the garment, and then there's no apprenticeships either. So that's really you know, something that we've lost in America is this, and I think Europe is still doing this, is the idea of an apprenticeship for a pattern maker who's going to eventually retire but pass their skills on to somebody. There's one manufacturing facility in Alabama that I've been working with called On Point Manufacturing, and they are doing on-demand manufacturing. So like to touch on technology and advanced manufacturing. So they produce one garment at a time for web orders for their customers. So even if you want to order 10 or 100, they're still going to produce it one at a time and completely minimize waste. Yes, it costs a little bit more than producing 1,000, for example, but then you don't end up with extra inventory that you don't really need. And I think that's fascinating. The other thing that they're very vocal about is paying not only a living wage to their sewers, they're paying $25 an hour in Alabama, which is really, really good, at a starting rate for a machine operator. Yeah, wow, I know. I thought about moving there to work for them for a while. But you know, so they're incorporating technology into the way that they manufacture, but it's still humans who are operating the sewing machines and sewing the garments. And I think that's the evolution of manufacturing in America, because we need the technology in order to make it affordable. But we still also have to value the people who are making the products, because you can't get away. It's never going to be, well, I shouldn't say never, but it's not robots who are making clothes. It's people. Yeah.
True. Rob, would you like to add anything in here?
Yeah, I agree with both Emily and Tara. It's just the system itself, I think, promotes this mass production of products. And, you know, and with the retail changing, does that change how much products are out there and discounted products and that whole system? I think making better things and less of them seems like it's, you know, something that hopefully we could all get behind. And you buy those things that you see as timeless or just really relevant, and you appreciate it. I think you see it happen in the organic food industry, and I think people care about their coffee this way or their craft beer. There's that thing where you really geek out about your product or that thing that you have, and how do we get that into fashion? Because I think there's a real disconnect there compared to some of these other places like food, where you appreciate that craft or that artisan making it. So, you know, I think there's a lot of variables, but ultimately it'd be nice to see some of this stuff get reinvented as we come out of this.
I have a question from the audience, and it's, as countries come out of lockdown, there is a backlog of fast fashion headed for the bin because it's so seasonal. Do you think manufacturing will have to change? P.S. There is a charitable lucky dip system helping to sort term called lost stock. Have you heard of this? And we have 15 minutes, so we're in Q&A time. Rapid fire.
I want to jump in on the idea of something seasonal or trendy. I mean, how is that being defined? I think right now a lot of brands are forced to look at their inventory because they weren't able to get product in for this new season, or they canceled their orders because of lack of sales. And, you know, who's to say that past inventory is no longer relevant because it was produced for a specific season? I think that whole concept is the part of the industry that really needs to change. And trends are so circular right now anyway. Like they're not even on a 20-year cycle anymore. They're on a 20-month cycle now, and they just keep coming back and coming back. That if a product is well made, there's no reason for it not to be relevant in the future. If it's not well made, that's a different story because it's not going to last very long. So yeah, we certainly need to look into that and see what the future will hold for recycling, because the recycling or remake part of the industry is definitely not where it needs to be to accommodate all of the product that's floating around.
Interesting. How are we going to look in 20 years in terms of clothing and accessories? Am I going to be in a plastic suit that keeps me amazing and fit and tight, and as I walk down the street, I'm like burning 1,000 calories, but no one can tell? What's clothing looking like and accessories looking like in 10, 15 years?
Hopefully. Wow. Hopefully, you know, I think ready-to-wear came about in the 50s after the war, right? Because before that, it was a lot more like made to measure and that kind of thing. And I do think there will be a backlash of people appreciating quality over quantity and really just coveting the items that they're buying. And I think there's also a need for product knowledge to understand what you're paying for. You know, you need to understand what you're buying and where it's coming from. And it's just like what Rob was saying about the food industry. It's like that farm to table, know your farmers, like know your producers. So hopefully we get to a world where we're being a little bit more selective in our choices in raw materials, our choices in how we produce things, and of course saying that and just being responsible with it. I think that in itself is kind of a giant wave of the future. I mean, of course, technology will get us into different fibers and things like that. But I mean, I do believe just reducing and being more thoughtful is going to be a big part of where we're going to be.
Rob?
I don't think it's going to look that different. Sorry.
I don't think so either.
Go ahead.
I really don't think it's going to look that different because of the increase or the rise in the resale market and all of these companies like The Real and even rental companies, you know, Rent the Runway, Wardrobe, which is a peer-to-peer rental app. I think we're going to be circulating the same well-made clothes, and the clothes that are actually really well-made are going to last even longer because they're going to be in circulation for longer. You know, if you look at vintage from like 40 years ago, it's still perfectly good and wearable, or even 50, 60 years ago, because it was so well made, versus fast fashion that was made 4 months ago that is falling apart. And so as long as clothing is well made, and a lot of that is coming from the luxury or high-end brands, those are still going to be in circulation, hopefully for a really long time, because they're resold or they're rented I think we're going to get away from the ownership of a lot of product and get into this reuse and a circular economy of clothing that's rented.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. The timelessness of products and the circular economy. And I think right now it's a system where it's built around pushing products to people. And I think it's going to shift to actually understanding what people really want, and then in a very thoughtful way, answering those needs and designing products for what people are after. Because it's changed. It's not driven by magazines anymore where we're telling you this is the trend you have to wear. I think there's an autonomy that's happening for individuals, and they get to start having a voice and a vision of what they want to buy and wear and have, and how does that start to translate, kind of a dialogue between the designers and the craftsmen that are making it with the people that are actually using it.
Fascinating. I'm glad to know that I won't have to dress like I'm in the movie The Fifth Element.
Oh, why? That was a great movie. Amazing costume.
You can always do what you want.
So fabulous. I'm so sorry. Okay. Emily, this question is for you. Working for a woman-owned business, how do you implement innovation and push diversity within Lafayette 148?
I mean, it's always in the front of your mind. I mean, we have such a diverse culture of people who wear our clothes. So of course, having to understand and know that, and make sure that, you're talking to everybody in your organization of, as we are building products, women owned, women run, women designed, a lot of, and there are men too, don't worry, but we, and we listen to them. But, I mean, a lot of it is just really discussing what are our needs, what are the functions in our life, and making sure that, everybody has a voice to that process, because, everybody's got a different perspective on that. So, I mean, that's something you definitely have to keep front of mind from every aspect, from how you're making the clothes to how you're photographing them, who you're putting them on, who you're selling them to, and really just understanding your customer and making sure that that's reflected within as well as what you're giving out.
Tara?
Yeah, so I'm going to approach that from the supply chain side, because most people don't know this, but a statistic I learned a few years ago that I think is still staggering is the average number of hands that touch every product. I'll talk about garments because I don't know if this is true for accessories, but the average number of people across the supply chain that touch a garment is 80 to 85. That's from the people who are growing the fiber all the way to the people selling the clothes. And most of those are women. And a lot of those women are in marginalized communities who are at risk of the climate crisis. And so for me, it's really important to try to direct brands that I work with to understand what that supply chain looks like and try to help it, whether that's working with artisans and supporting small communities for their product, or just being really conscious of the supply chain itself and communicating that so that the customers know where product is coming from and how it's made. And I think that's really important, because right now there's so much opacity in the fashion design world. Most brands don't even know where their products are being made, and that's a failure of the system. And so independent designers that I work with are really curious. They want to go to the factories. They want to go to the farms where the organic cotton is being grown, and meet the farmers, or, work with the new hemp supply chain. And I know that sounds super granola and organic, but hemp right now is having a revival and is being really optimized by use of technology. So I think there's some really interesting things coming in the textile world that are going to revolutionize the industry. But just being cautious and also being transparent, I think that's crazy important right now.
Oh, I 100% agree with you on the transparency, for sure. Rob?
Yeah, the transparency, I think, is such a crucial element. And really, I think a lot of it comes to materials, and what are those materials that you're using? How do you really stand behind some of those? And inform the consumer and the user about what it is. And the same way we talked about food earlier, how do you make that connection and just understand what it is that you're actually putting on your body, or the product that it's, your bag, if it's made out of, a certain type of material. You want to know what that is, and you should be aware of that.
My next question for the panel is, with so many brands out there, it is definitely saturated with brand, high, mid, low. How do you keep your product unique and innovative, and not just now, but also thinking in terms of the future, right? How do you still stay current with so many varieties of companies out there, and stay engaged with your customer, right? Because you want them to come back.
I mean, I think that the key to that is just really knowing your customer and having as much contact with them as possible. You know what I mean? They're the ones telling you what they want. I mean, it's not for us to tell them what they need. It's, this is for them. So it's knowing really what they appreciate, what they respect, what they like about your product, and having that dialogue in some way to sort of really be engaged with it, because they'll be loyal to you if you really cater to them and their needs, and we've seen that through our customers big time. So, I think you just have to be true to who you are as a brand. You can experiment but stay in your lane. You know what you're best at. Stick to your skills. Right. It's like I feel like that's what was sort of happening in all this world, was everybody was trying to be everything that everybody wanted them to be, and it was just like, oh my God, like just do what you're good at. Like they can get that from somebody else. Let them have their. So I think that's really important, that you just culture a thing that people you're known for, and number one, the customer. It's all about them.
Sarah, Rob?
Yeah, 100%. I just want to echo what Emily said, and it's just that being like authentic to what you're good at and just playing to your strengths. I think the second you try to be everything, you just water down what you are, and it's a tough thing to try to answer everybody.
I got a question from Mark. And he says, are there efforts being made to design long-lasting, durable clothes for underdeveloped countries or regions?
I don't know. It's a good question. Tara, you might probably have more insight on something like that.
I'm curious the impetus of the question, but I can kind of guess where that's coming from. I haven't seen any initiatives to make clothes specifically for underdeveloped countries. I've seen a lot of initiatives that are trying to work with artisans in underdeveloped countries to help increase their minimum wage and provide a living wage. But to make durable clothes specifically for those communities, I think it's an interesting idea, especially now that we're, in a climate crisis that is affecting these communities, and clothing is going to be really important to keep for longevity and safety and health. Nope, because there's room to start something.
Okay, I have two questions. The first is, what brands are good at demonstrating transparency in the supply chain? And we have 2 minutes, so that's question number one.
I can name, one brand in Sweden called Asket, like basket, but without the B. And it's a menswear brand, and they showcase all of their factories, all of where the material is coming from. They show the average time that a worker has been at the factory, what their wages are, et cetera, et cetera. Like, they've mapped it all out. It's really, really well done. So that's one that I would definitely point to.
Okay. Rob or Emily? If not, I'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, I think in terms of like a big brand, you definitely see Patagonia takes big steps towards, having that information on their website of who's manufacturing it, and a lot of the similar things, maybe not as in much detail as the Asket brand, but I definitely think they're a leader in terms of bigger brands that are being transparent about that.
Okay, I'm going to try to squeeze this last question in. What is the most ripe for disruption in the industry? What is most ripe for disruption in the industry? Supply chain, consumer mindset, or government policy?
All of the above. all of it. It all needs an overhaul. Clear cut.
Right.
Start regrowth.
Yeah, I think it'll come from the consumer, though. I think the other ones are definitely important, but if you could get the consumers, the people, and the communities to really be aware of that and champion it, I think that's where it's going to really, that grassroots element is going to really start to affect change.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, panel, thank you so much. I believe we are at time. Is that correct, Kelly, or do we have a little bit?
No, that was perfect. You guys ended right on time. I love it.
Well, thank you again, Emily Smith, for your time, Tara St. James, and of course, Rob Price.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists.